Hello guys, so in this tutorial we will learn how to implement user permissions. Here I have a project based on my previous video, Laravel Authentication 2020 with Laravel 8. And this is a project that I added a new migration to. So here's the migration, user permissions. It has an ID, it has integer user ID, long text permissions, and timestamps. And I have a new model called permissions, and basically in user.php, so this is user.php, I have permissions, public function permissions, returning this has one, and permissions class foreign key user ID. So now what I want to do is I want to actually clear everything, because here I will have table string row. So basically now we say PHP artisan migrate fresh. Now this user that we created here will be gone, and now here in users table we have a row. Here we will have a new page called manage users. So now let me take a look here, and here we will have user equals to user. So we will pass user instead of using vuex. So basically I will not use vuex, I will just use props. So this manage users will have props, and I will not validate props either. This will be user. And here I'm sure to get the user, so whatever operation I will perform on it, I do not need to check if it exists, if it's not undefined or no. So basically here div, for that I need a controller. So I will say PHP artisan make controller users controller, and here I will say public function get users, and this will just return user all. And here we will have public function change permissions. This will be a request, and here permission set, or yes, permissions equals to permissions where ID equals to request ID, and we also need to say get first, so it will get the permissions, and here we will just update the permissions, request permissions, and permissions save, return true. So now go to routes, I have a new route, users group function, and here we will have route get users app HTTP controllers. This will be users controller at get users. Now copy, and this will be change permissions. This will be change permissions and post. Save. Here we will have data, return object, and here we will have users, mounted, this that get users, methods, get users, be async, const data equals await access that get. This will be just users, get users, and here we will have this users equals data. Let me take a look at my controller. Return user all. Okay, we will say table class w full border collapse, and we will havethead, tr, td, it will be name, email, role, actions, and here we'll have tbody, and here we will have tr, v4, user, and users, key, user ID, and here we will have a td with username, user email, user role, and here we will have some actions. So we have a button, last name, bg blue 500, text white, px2, p11, text sm, and here we'll have change permissions. Actually, this will be router link, dynamic tool slash users slash user ID slash change permissions. Here we go. And here, and in JavaScript, we will need a new folder called data, and in data, new JavaScript file called permissions, and this will be export default like so. And here we will have key can access ACP, and here we will have value false, title can access ACP. ACP is the admin control panel, which for now we will just use our manage users page. And another one, we will have key can change permissions value false title can change permissions like so. And in here we will import permissions from data permissions. No, wait, not in this one. So this one needs to be a new view component called change permissions. And here we'll have a div. Here we will import. We will have props user. So mounted if, and by the way, I forgot, we need to go to users controller and say with permissions get. And here we'll say if user this user permissions, and also in auth controller and init we all need to say, change it a bit, say id auth id user with permissions where id is equal to id, and then get. Now we should have our permissions. Well, this I will change later. This I will implement later. So for now, I will say form and here I will say div class name class mb4, and here label class block, and this will say this one needs to be b4, and here we need to say permission index in permissions. So basically now I'm going to say data return permissions, return permissions. Here we go, and key index. We'll have permission, and here we will have a h1 text real excel mb4, and it will say change permissions, and here we will have a switch permission or value and an option value. Yes, no, no. And here we'll have a button class bg green 500 text white px2 py8, let's say rounded, and save changes. So here we'll have methods, and this will be async save. So basically, well, it's kind of wrong because I'm going to say this mounted this dot get user. So sync get user const data equals await axios.get, and we need to create a function for getting one user. So public function get user, and here we'll have ID, return user with permissions where ID is equal to ID, and then first. Now we need to update the route. Oh, and here get user slash ID. Get user. So manage users and change permissions. We need to say users get user slash this route params ID. And now this, let's call it profile equals data. And now we'll need a function parse permissions, which will take in permissions, this permissions for each permission, if permission key. We'll also need to say permissions for each, and call this perm. Say if perm key equals permission key, perm value equals permission value. So now we'll say this parse permissions, this of data permissions. So now we will say const data equals ID, this route params ID, then permissions, this permission, and then await axios.post users change permissions data, and then window location dashboard. Here we go. Now let's test this. Well, we need to manage users. User email. So now we are in the manage users view, and let's test this out. So we need to add it to our routes. Router. To more. This will be manage users dashboard, and this will be users ID change permissions. This will be change permissions. Create user sign up, Okay, so role has to be something. So register user role will be user. Here we go, we have a user with username. Now we can log in. Here we go. By the way, I want, when you log in, you see window, location, dashboard, Laravel permissions doesn't exist. User permissions. So basically this needs to be ID. No, here we will have public table user permissions. Again, and now when we init, we have a user. And by the way, this needs to be first. So we have a user, and when we go to dashboard, we have a user and this nice table. It should be, what is it called? Username. And this should be called username. So now let's refresh one more time. Now change permissions. It's not switch, it's select. Oh my god, what am I doing? I think you realized it by now. You're screaming at me. Here we go. Now we have no and no. So if we click this to be yes, save changes, it's still no. Because here, submit, prevent, here we go. So yes, something wrong. Users controller 21. We need to say user equals user with permissions where ID is equal to request ID first, and now permissions ID where user permissions ID, if not is set permissions ID, then permissions equals new permissions user ID equals user ID. There we go. So here say yes. Problem. Trying to get property ID of non-object. So basically we need to say if not is set user permissions ID, then need to make new permissions, else take these, put them here, and delete this one. Try again. Problem, array to string conversion. Okay, this basically means that in our user's controller, in our change permissions component, we need to say JSON parse, stringify. These are permissions, and this needs to be JSON parse XO. This yes. So this will need to say this that router push dashboard. But this should be yes now. It's still no. Value true. So basically something's wrong with our component here. This needs to be permission, that key. Doesn't need to be. This needs to be permission that value though, and this needs to be perm that value. So now it should be yes. Still no. Data permissions that permissions. And now it's yes. So if we say yes here and change permissions, it's both yes. So that's how you make a user. And if you want to check if the permission is in use, then you can just put and mount it here an if statement and find the key. Find the key here. You go into permissions again, which you JSON parsed, and you get the permission via the key that you want to get. So can access HTTP value true or value false. So that's how you do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.